We're going to transform our approaches to work. And I think there are 5 approaches that we have to shift, no matter what our level is, how we think about work and the permissions we give ourselves. And then I'm going to give you a framework to make it happen. So let me tell you the 5 things I want to change. And I'm curious if these are things you think we need to transform quickly at Zoom as well. Because you've been given permission by the CEO to do it. Let's do it. So here's the first thing. I think what we need to do is stop confusing being organized with being simplified. Ever feel that way? I have employees that could just make you cry with the spreadsheets that they have. They're amazing spreadsheets. I feel overwhelmed. Being organized is not the same thing as being simplified. So think about it like this. Marie Kondo, right, the closet organizer, the organizing expert. The beauty of what she did was not that she organized everything in your closet. She got rid of the things that didn't bring you joy, that had no value. So the things that were left you could focus on and actually use. It's the same thing at work. We need to stop organizing and we need to be able to get rid of. And I'm not suggesting that every morning, although you could, open up your inbox, look at every email and think, does this bring me joy? Because it won't. It's just no, every single one you would delete. But it definitely means you have to start thinking about, it's not just about getting everything organized. It's what you're organizing first. That's number 1. I'm not saying processes are great, but not everything is a 15-step program. Here's the next one. I think we have to start valuing subtraction, not addition. Now this is interesting because you don't think about this. We talk a lot about how leaders, right, they're coaches or they're architects, and that's about building, and you have to do that. But you know what I really think is important is sculpting, because sculptors reveal what's the most important. It's not about just adding more, it's about getting rid of what's not important to reveal what is the thing of value. And so that has to change how we think at work, because most people, at least most organizations, you are bonused or given a raise based on managing more people, more products, more geographies, more. I don't know many people, though this is changing, that are rewarded for doing less. It's starting to change, and I'll give you an example at Sanofi. I do a lot in regulated industries, because if they can do it, we can all do it. And what was really interesting is when I was doing a session there, they talked about how important the concept of stop it is. I do this in my organization too. Anytime there is strategic planning or a project being planned, you have to lay out your plan for what you're going to do. And especially in strategic planning, people love to say, all the 75,000 things they're going to do next year, right? But at Sanofi, you are mandated to also say what you will stop doing in order to be able to accomplish those things. And what's magic about that is people all of a sudden think of, yeah, what's kind of calcified over the year that we just need to get rid of? What's going to get in our way that's going to make us say, oh, we're behind schedule? And also for leaders, it takes away the excuses because you've given people permission to get rid of things. I do that with my team. And I'll tell you, it was shocking to me. Right, so, I have a business that talks about change and simplicity. And I said to them when we were doing strategic planning several years ago, show me your plans. And oh my God, 75,000 things, right? The PowerPoints would have just knocked your socks off. But I said, are these achievable? And then everyone started to go, well, yeah, I think if that. And I said, no. You don't get to say you're going to do these things and then have excuses later. What are you going to stop doing? And I have to tell you, they were silent because they said, I didn't realize we could do that. And I think you probably don't realize you could too. So how do we build subtraction into our daily work? Now here's the third one, and this is kind of interesting. I think we need to focus on more compass, less clock. Which, by the way, if I were you sitting here in the audience, I'd be like, well, yeah, okay, that sounds great. But here's the thing, if you go home at night, okay, and I asked you, you come home, I'm there, and I ask you, what do you spend your day doing? Tell me about your day. The first visual that probably pops into your mind is your Outlook calendar. And you're going to start to go, yeah, at 9 o'clock I did this, and 10 o'clock. We live by our calendar, which is why I say to most people, they're not leading. They're barely managing. You are executing your calendar. That is how you live. And I think what we need to be able to do is spend less of our time just executing things and be more protective of it. I mean, ask yourself, if you looked at your calendar, are you spending your time or are you investing your time? Those are very different. And that's about putting boundaries on your time, not just giving it away. Here's the next one. And we're going to get interactive with this, so get ready with your phones here in a second. I think, and this is fundamental, this is something Eric was saying on stage too, which is, it's about you being happier at work, but it's about making work better, right? And so you can have more enjoyable work. You can do things that are important. And I think we need to build in more time for thinking. Now, again, that's really easy to say, Lisa. But because it's strategic, it's very important. I think thinking has become a daring act in most companies. How many of you, just by raising your hands, have ever had to sneak a fake meeting on your calendar just to protect your time to do something? Yeah, we all have, come on. But it's funny, when I ask you this, how many of you wish you had more time to think during the day? Right, but then when you try and take the time, you have to hide it, right? Because we got to seem busy. Because I'm busy, you're busy, we could have a busy off, right? It's kind of like when someone says to you, how are you doing? I'm busy. Oh, I'm busy, right? And we all start busy offing. So, right, I'm busy. I took 3 red eyes last night. So I feel like making time to think is so important because we say we value it, but we don't. So for example, I always like to give this anecdote of, let's say you walked into someone's office, right? You're in person. You'd walk in and you're trying to see John. And there's John sitting in his office because you need something to ask him. And he's just staring out his window. And you go, oh, John, sorry to bother you. And John says, oh no, that's okay. I was just thinking. What's the first thing that pops in your head about John? Is he okay? Get back to work? Lazy? Wish I could just sit around all day like that. Right? Thinking is a daring act, but it's very important. And I'll tell you why. But first, I need to ask you a question. Let's go to our phones. And I want you to answer this question for me. When and where do you do your very best thinking? I think I know what you were trying to say there. Shower. God, I have to laugh because I've asked this question many times. Before COVID, no one said shower. Now, it's always the number one, like everyone's just showering the hell out of things all around the world. Like, I'm showering. It's where I do my best thinking. Like people are just like decompressing in the shower. Having their White Lotus moment in the shower. Crying in the shower. Okay, let's see what we got here. Anyone surprised by this so far? Let me ask a different question. Anyone see some commonalities in this? Alone? Quiet? Not at work? Surprise! I've never had anyone say, when do I do my best thinking? Looking through emails, sitting in meetings, it's not on there, is it? Where do we spend our time? So what's interesting about this gets back to the needing more time to think. We do our best thinking when we are alone. I don't know about your showers. I'm going with alone on that. When it's quiet and when it's not at work. Sometimes it's at work or it's before you start work, you dive into work. And that's the reality for most people, right? Because then you get into it, right? All of a sudden your time is hijacked. But we do our best thinking when we are alone. We get our best ideas when we are alone, when our mind can just kind of wander, right? That's when you have those ahas. But we build our best ideas when we are together. And that's the problem with meetings. We think, now we're going to think, right? Time for us to solve a problem. Let's call a meeting. Most meetings are horrible. No one's thought through the question that we need to ask. So we get there and we come up with the same answers that we've always had, and they suck. If you give people time to think, they'll come with better answers. That's why blocking thinking time or time for deep work is such a big movement right now. I do it with my company. I know pockets of Accenture do it, Google do it, maybe you do it as well. But I mandate to my team, and sometimes you have to mandate it because you take away the fear, to block 2 hours of work on your calendar whenever you want. I work better in the morning, some people do in the afternoon, just for deep work, and keep that time sacred. Because I want them to be able to know thinking is important and that it's okay to protect their time. So when we think about thinking, here's what's really interesting to me. This leads to culture, and this is the fifth thing. I would argue that most companies, yours might be different, that we don't really have culture, we have cultural aesthetics. And what I mean by that is, we think about culture as like, colorful brainstorming rooms and whiteboards and, free coffee and all that kind of stuff. That's fine. But if that's all it would take, Google would have a 100% retention rate, and they don't. It's not about giving people perks that they can't use. No one wants more yoga classes if they can't use them. And that's kind of the joke at Bloomberg in New York. They had put in all these like wellness pods and meditation rooms, and no one could ever use them because they were always filled with people taking conference calls because they couldn't concentrate in their open plan environment, and the conference rooms were always full. So my feeling on culture is this, and this leads in perfectly to what the teams that we're talking up here today were saying. If you get the work right, you get the culture right. To me, that's it. If someone goes home at night and you say, what did you do all day? And their answer was meetings and emails, that within your team, because your team is your culture, that's your culture. But if they go home at night and they say, I worked on this really innovative project, I'm working on this, even if you're exhausted, I'm working on this new pricing model, whatever it is, that's your culture. If you get the work right, you get the culture right. And that's why simplicity is so important.
I'd like to have a cut the crap committee at work. Here's the thing, simplicity is free. For the most part, it's free. And that's what's really cool about it, right? It doesn't cost you anything to ask people for their work hacks. It doesn't cost you anything necessarily to get rid of things. It costs more to add. Often it helps you to subtract. Cut the crap committees is when they designate each month within their team 2 people that are kind of the crap killers, if you will, and their job for the next 30 days is to observe their team in the wild, right? Like social anthropologists, and see how they work. And realize all the crap that we do that we don't even realize we do. And they report back. In fact, they're mandated to report back and say, here are all the things that we think are complete time sucks. And what's cool about that is it sends a signal, simplicity is important. I expect you to challenge work, and don't be afraid. I am asking you to tell me what's wrong. And that sends a powerful message because it takes away not just the friction, because that's where most leaders go, it takes away the fear. Maybe you don't want to do that at your job. Maybe you don't want to have a cut the crap committee. Maybe you want to lean in, and you're going to be more like, I'm giving you regulated examples because I know that's the first pushback I get. We're regulated, we can't simplify. You can. Novartis, Pfizer, Van City Credit Union, they have simplicity initiatives. They reward and bonus people based on what they get rid of and stop doing. They have chief simplicity officers, and they have teams trained in agile, simplicity champions, whose job it is to kill unnecessary waste. How big do you want to go? Let me give you an example of Van City Credit Union. Van City Credit Union is a very cool credit union in Vancouver, Canada. And they are the most unlikely group of people to simplify. They are regulated as a credit union. They are small. They cannot compete with investment banks or just larger corporate banks like Chase, or if you want to talk about some of the others, HSBC, et cetera. And they were losing customers, or members, if you will, because they weren't moving fast enough. Their customer service rankings were in the toilet, and the people's ability to get things done was terrible. Yet they were nice. Nobody doubted that. But the problem is that to compete, they have to move faster. And so I was at this banking conference, and I met this woman named Jayanne. And I couldn't figure out why there was this nice little credit union booth among, HSBC and JP Morgan and Citi, et cetera. I mean, they just looked completely out of place. And I said, well, what's your role? And she said, I'm the chief simplicity officer. And this was years ago. And I said, I didn't know that was a thing. And she said, no, I'm the Chief Simplicity Officer. And I said, how did you get the job? And she said, I just decided I was the Chief Simplicity Officer, and I named myself. I guess you can do that at a smaller organization. And I said, well, what do you do? I mean, I think I know what you do, but she said, we were drowning in just the inability to move forward. We were the nice bank that couldn't get anything done, basically. And she said, I decided to mobilize people and have them tell me what are all the things that aren't working. And we were going to start small to go big. And so what she did is she said anybody could come to her team that was trained in Agile. They created a half-day sprint. And they said, you can bring any policy, P&Ps, policies and procedures or forms, and we will help you hack it. All we ask, because we'll pay for it, right, with our time, is that you kill something. You get rid of something once you go through the process. They did 18 hacks in 6 months. Here were the results. This is free. All it cost them was their time. They simplified or eliminated over 300 policies. They got rid of 100 forms that interacted with customers, and they took almost 200 steps out of processes when they interacted with their members. At the end of the year, they had their highest employee satisfaction ratings, and they had their highest customer satisfaction ratings. And what was interesting about it, when you asked Jayanne, she said, what I didn't expect was, I thought this was an efficiency exercise. And it was. They saved a ton of time and money and headaches. But she said the headaches were the most important. We've never retained employees like this. We spend all our time on, giving benefits to people, organic food in the cafeteria, bring your dog to work, whatever it was. She said none of these benefits matter if people can't really use them. Or if when they go home at night and their spouse or partner, whoever asks them, what did you spend your day doing? She said they would say meetings and emails. The benefits don't matter if the work sucks. If you get the work right, you get the culture right. You save money, but you save people too. It's a mental health imperative.
I was asked to come and speak today to really give a message around practicality. So just by raising our hands, we're going to get interactive, and we're also going to use our phone. So let me ask you a first question here, just by show of hands. How many of you experience some form of complexity at work? Yeah, okay. I'm always surprised if somebody doesn't raise their hand. What I want to be able to do is show you a few things. I want to show you how complexity happens. Then I want to talk about how people are using simplicity as a strategic advantage. And then I want you to leave with some really practical tips. And we're going to do an interactive exercise so you can walk away with things to do right away. The power around simplicity is more than just saving money. The big thing for everyone here is it's about saving time. And the reason that's important isn't because you want to be able to do more, it's that you want to be able to do valuable. And so much of us don't have enough time to think. And we give away our time too freely. So we're going to put boundaries around that today because the impact is incredible. So think about this. If a person works 2,100 hours a year, you probably work much more than that. That's 40 hours a week. If they got back just 10% of their time, 10%, and I'm sure you do more than 10% of wasted things, right, during the year, it's 210 hours, right? That's 5 weeks of time. It's more than a month. So the impact that has collectively is millions and millions of hours over time. So let's dive in and let's start talking about simplification. Now let me ask you another question here. How many people here feel that their jobs have gotten more complex over the last 5 years? More complex, okay. Now what's interesting about that is because for many people here, you're leaders. And you're probably in the third stage of your career, so you experience more complexity. Do you know what the 3 stages of a career are? I'm going to tell you what they are, okay? The 3 stages of a career, you're in the third stage, which is the most important. So let me share what they are, and then you can see if you relate to them, okay? Stage number 1 is I can't wait until I'm important enough to be included in meetings. Do you remember that stage? Yeah. I can't believe I ever had that stage. The second is, I feel so important now being included in these meetings. Remember that? That's why when you have employees that say they don't want to be in meetings, but then they have FOMO when they're not asked, That's that stage. This is your stage. I'll do anything legal and even illegal things to avoid meetings. You want to be able to get out of meetings. You want to spend your time on things that matter. So let's dive in and let's do that. Grab your phone for me if you can. And what I'm going to do is have you open up a website that's really cool. If you haven't used this before, it's great with your teams. Menti.com. So go there for me right now, menti.com. And when you get there, I'll read out this code for you to enter. It's 9308 3608. So once again, menti.com and the code 9308 3608. Someone raise their hand if you were able to get in. Okay, we're getting there. I know it's early and you're not caffeinated yet. It's okay. All right, I'm going to keep moving on, and this code will be at the top of your screen. So if you get knocked out, you can get back in. Here's the first question, and you can click next slide on your phone if it doesn't advance to this. How often, specifically, are you and your team experiencing complexity in your daily work? Now, your options are never, rarely, often, very often. Dear God, please make it stop. Okay. Sure can. Yep. Complexity to me is unnecessary work, time sucks, and things that are not adding value. Right? Think of it more as complicated, unnecessarily complicated and complex. Okay? So we've got, let's see the results here so far. We have no liars that said never, so that's good. We have 2 rarely. That's very good. 3 rarely. See me later with your resumes. That's amazing. Often and very often. Anyone surprised by this? No? You shouldn't be surprised, because whether this is your real or perceived, or whether this is your team's real or perceived, this is what the data shows. So let me show you what I mean. Deloitte's done several studies on this, and they asked people up to VP level to describe their work. And almost 75% of them, and this was over 5,000 people that they surveyed, defined their work as complex or very complex and said it was only getting worse. Frankly, when I see these numbers, my reaction is that it doesn't really matter. If you want to know the truth, it doesn't really matter. It doesn't matter until really the C-suite feels it and wants to change it, because this has been happening for a while. But here's the good news, is that now it's really starting to impact leaders like you, and things are being done about it. SAP did a future of work study, and for the first time, they asked CEOs what their #1 strategic issue was, and 70% of them said complexity. So it was the first time that the call was coming from inside the house, right? CEOs were saying, usually it's pricing, it's competitiveness, it's the war on talent, it can be wars, it can be all kinds of things. This was the first time it was a self-inflicted wound. And so what's interesting about that is, for the first time, the C-suite is seeing that complexity is not just a financial issue. It is. But really what it is, it's the enemy of meaningful work. And what that means is, if you're operating with complexity, you can't move fast enough. You are spending too much time on unnecessary work versus necessary. And if you don't believe me, complexity being a strategic advantage is a key strategic pillar in a lot of organizations today. They basically swapped out innovation as a strategic pillar for simplicity, because they realized that the competition that's catching them off guard are the ones they didn't expect, the ones that were focused on simplicity. Let me show you what I mean. So this slide, if you look here, this is just an example of multi-billion-dollar companies that are less than 20 years old. Netflix is an exception, that have completely disrupted industries, right? Just because of simplicity and focus. So think about this. Uber. How many people have taken an Uber in the last month, by the way? Right. Uber makes it simple to get a car. Airbnb makes it easy to get a place to stay, right? Kickstarter makes it simple for small companies like me to be able to use money and get things to market faster than other people. You've got WhatsApp. It's free to talk on the phone. It's Dropbox, right? Easy to share files. I like to say Match.com, simple to date people that you shouldn't. Right? Sometimes you need the friction. You know what I mean? So anyway, billion-dollar companies that are just completely disrupting things because they're focused and they can move faster than the people that are complex. That's the idea. So the question for you isn't should you simplify. Here's the question. Why do you choose complexity every day? And this is the part where I really want to provoke you a little bit. Why do you choose complexity without even realizing it every single day? I want to do 2 exercises with you to prove what I mean, okay? So the first exercise, let me think which one I want to do first. Okay, the first exercise you can do actually sitting at your chair, okay? So if you have something in your hands, put it down. And I'm going to have you do a simple exercise. You can also do this with your teams. I want you to, on the count of 3, pat your head, rub your stomach, click your heels. Let's do it. 1, 2, 3. Pat your head. Good. Rub your stomach and click your heels. Okay. You're concentrating a lot, which is good. All right, let's stop. I can't see everybody. How many people were able to do all 3 at once? Okay, good. But I didn't tell you to do all 3 at once. I just said, pat your head, rub your stomach, click your heels. And everybody immediately started to get very serious and concentrate because you don't want to look stupid in front of other people. And you wanted to do it very well, okay? And you did all 3 things at once. This is kind of an analogy for what happens at work because we're wired often to create complexity that's unnecessary. So we like to multitask, and that's fine. I think you should multitask. But the more strategic the work that you're doing, the more diminishing returns you're going to get because you can't focus. Well, that's my point, which is how do we do one at a time versus always trying to do all of them, diminishing, to your point. So that's one thing. The other one is we always like, or maybe your employees do, to elevate everything to the same level of urgency. And this is a real issue at a lot of companies, right? Everything has to be urgent. Every email, every meeting, every response, every decision. Yes, some do, but not all do. And this is especially true with people that are younger that work for you because they haven't really figured out, right, the ways of working. So how can we teach them not to embrace false urgency? So a lot of complexity, the bad news is that it can be self-imposed. But the good news is a lot of it is in our sphere of control. And that's the thing you really want to focus on is what is the sphere of control that your teams can start to decomplexify at work. Now let me do one more example around complexity, because there's another thing that happens. So this exercise is we're gonna remember a number, and you're gonna repeat it back to me. Okay, it's a very simple exercise, and it'll take us about 10 seconds. Okay, I'm gonna put the number up on the screen, and I'll leave it there, and then I'm gonna ask you to raise your hand if you can repeat it back to me. Okay? Here we go. See if you can catalog this. Who's got it? Got it here? What do you got? 315-642-7984. Close, but not. Almost. Did you have it? You did. How did you get it? He wrote it down. Did anyone else write it down? Now this is interesting. You hear what he said, cheater. Did anybody take a picture? This is what's so interesting is everybody should have been able to get it. I didn't say memorize it. I said, I want you to be able to repeat it back to me. And what happens is no one said you couldn't take a picture. No one said you couldn't write it down. And we don't spend enough time questioning the way that we work or giving people the ability to take away the fear so they can question the way they work. You know why? Because they think they're cheating. A lot of complexity is driven by fear. And what's interesting about this is our job as leaders is not just to reduce the friction, right, getting rid of stuff, but to reduce the fear. Because a lot of people have hacks and ways to improve systems, but they're afraid to tell you because they think they're cheating. Doing less is seen as bad. And this is an example right here. This is actually a winning team at Novartis. I sit on a board at Novartis, which is a pharmaceutical company in Basel. And what's interesting about this group, this was one of their big offsites, and Voss, who's the CEO, and all of his, their CIO and CTO, we did this work hackathon. And over 3 days, we invited people from all across the company to tackle one simple problem that the marketing group wasn't able to solve. They had over 1,000 solutions in just a few days. This is the winning team, and they got a week off of work. Pretty good. What was interesting was there are lots of ways to hack work, but one, we never ask people, and two, they're too afraid to share them with you. They think they're cheating. So how can we actually change that mindset? So I want to talk to you quickly about the complexity trap, and then I'm going to tell you some stories of how people have broken out of it. So see if this is true for you, okay? So the complexity trap is what happens if you don't simplify. The first thing is you lose focus. Because a lot of people, and I'm going to ask you if this happens to you, get bonused, get a raise, get a promotion based on doing more, not doing valuable. And what I mean by that is you manage more people, a bigger budget, more geographies, more products and services, more. Very rarely are people rewarded for less. That's changing, by the way. Sanofi, which is another pharmaceutical company, is actually bonusing people for simplifying and getting rid of things. So until we actually change our ability of how we tell people what work really is, we say we want valuable work, but we actually give them more, they're not going to have focus. That's the first part of the trap. The second part, which I think is so interesting, is this. You have less agility. And let me just say something about agility really quickly, which is, especially in these last few years with COVID, if one more person tells you to pivot, you're allowed to slap them, right? Everyone is pivoting so hard right now. But that's not the point. I want my team to be able to pivot and be agile. But the problem is we've kind of, through COVID, made that a metaphor for being able to react to change, right? Being ready for the thing that's going to happen to us. I don't want people to be able to wait for change. I want them to create it and put it on others. So the reason I'm telling you that is, if you're operating with complexity, you can't move. And the problem is it's a defensive stance. Complexity is defense. Simplicity is offense, and lets you drive the change, not react to it. Okay, so it's really important. The third thing is an ability to be able to think. So how many people here wish they had more time to think during the day? So much time is wasted when it could be put towards thinking about solving problems. So one of the things that's a problem is, are we valuing within our companies doing or thinking? And thinking, I believe, in a lot of companies is a daring act. It's a really daring act. We say we value it, but if you think about it, when you used to go to somebody's office, right, and you'd say, you want to knock on someone's door and ask them a question, and if they were kind of staring out the window, and you'd say, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, and that person might react and go, oh, it's okay, I'm just thinking. What would your reaction be to that? Get back to work, right? I wish I had time to just sit around and think. We want to think, but then when people are doing it, we see them as not really working. So how do we actually give people time to think and think about when we think best? So let me get meta with you for a minute, because the reason thinking is important is because simplicity actually is the front end of innovation, and you don't realize it. Innovation is not about coming up with more ideas. Innovation starts by creating the space to think in the first place. And the reason so many people aren't able to give you innovation, they're not able to come up with better ideas, is because they don't have time to think. So when they come to brainstorms and they say, you say, who's got an idea? They haven't even thought about it. So you're not going to get anything different.